Hi everybody, it's Nomiki Konst. I just wanted to first off say thank you so much for being a subscriber to the show. It is a new show. It launched about a week ago, I think, today. And we are doing so great. On YouTube, we're doing great. On Patreon, we're doing great. I just am so grateful for your support in the first week on our first episode with a few extras that have gone up. It has been an insane week, and even though we are putting out a new show tomorrow on YouTube, and the Iowa caucus is on Monday, I have to talk to you guys in between our weekly show because there's just been so much news involving the Democratic National Committee. If you are not a patron to the show on Patreon, I hope you can join. Please do, because I will be doing more breakdowns of the DNC exclusively on Patreon. We have to pay our bills. We have to hire another producer. We are trying so hard to build this show in the middle of an election season and provide you with the best content. So if you can, even if it's just the cost of a cold brew and a half at $9 a month can really make a huge difference to the show, and we can provide better content to you. But in the meantime, I will be sharing a good chunk of our content on YouTube, but a few days later. So with that being said, the DNC has been up to some shenanigans over the last week. I am not in the studio. I'm at home because it's a Saturday night, and I thought I have to share with you what's going on. There's a lot of conversation on the internet. There are some rumors that are spreading around that I think are weapons to distract us away from what's really going on, and I want to clear that up for you. But before I clear up all the rumors, I also want to explain to you how the DNC is structured and is functioning. Because I hear things like, the DNC did this, but really it's not the entire DNC as a body, it's the chair of the DNC, Tom Perez. This week, Tom Perez had announced that the DNC, but I'm going to say he because he decided that they were going to allow, they changed the qualifications for the debates, and that would essentially allow Michael Bloomberg to enter the debate stage. And this is just after Michael Bloomberg gave a generous sum of $250,000 to $300,000 to the Democratic National Committee. The first question is, if, as many DNC members have said, if another candidate had done that and wasn't on the debate stage, would they have gotten on the debate stage? If one of the other candidates that dropped out or is still in the race, if John Delaney gave $300,000 to the DNC 4 days ago, would he have dropped out 2 days ago? These are the kinds of questions they're asking. But, it really comes down to, why wasn't there a set of rules for the debate? The debate process was not voted on. It was not clear. They had made a statement saying they were going to do 12 debates. Okay, but what kind of qualifications? What are the metrics? What are the benchmarks that the candidates needed to do ahead of time so the candidates could plan to be on the debate stage? You can't figure it out as you go, and that's really what has been going on with the DNC. Now the basic point I want to reiterate about the DNC is it is a corporation, and it has no interest, the way that it is structured right now, in becoming a democratic organization with a lowercase d. It does not have any interest in being held accountable for violating its own bylaws, for failing to have good governance, and it really is being run by a set of folks who have a lot of moneyed interests in keeping the Democratic Party dysfunctional and unrepresentative of the interests of voters. That's not a surprise, right? But before we get into what's happening, what could possibly be happening, I just want to reiterate that in 2017, when Keith Ellison ran against, there was a DNC chairs race. There were several people running in that DNC chairs race. I covered it for TYT. If you do want to find those old videos, they are on the Young Turks on one of their playlists. You can find a Democratic National Committee chairs race playlist, and I was there at every single event covering the race, and I interviewed all of the candidates. And it was very hard to lock down an interview with Tom Perez. I don't know what he was hiding from, because I asked him the same questions I asked other chair candidates, including Pete Buttigieg. But in that race, all of the DNC members, now the way that the DNC members work, just so you get it, there are 440 DNC members. About 200 are directly elected by their states, and they're divided by gender too. Of course, that doesn't even get into non-binary, but for the sake of the way that the DNC is structured right now, there are about 200 directly elected. Now, right now in California, for instance, people are busting their butts running for DNC membership. And what that means is in California, which is a better run state, they have to dig out of their own pockets, run across the state. It's not based on your location. You're representing the entire state. So if you're from San Diego, you got to go up to Northern California. You have to make lots of phone calls. In some cases, you're printing literature. You're paying for expenses of travel. And it's not... That is probably one of the fairer processes, one of the better states, and it still weighs very heavily on who can afford to run for this kind of position, and who's also interested in doing it, because you have to be crazy to be a DNC member. But, you know, for the most part, it attracts people who are party activists and who possibly want to reform the DNC. There is a lot of great reform coming out of California, but again, even California needs reform internally. So 200 directly elected DNC members. Then there are about 118 state party chairs and vice chairs that are elected within their states. Of course, every state is different. Some parties, state parties are more democratic with a lowercase d than others. New York is notorious. Sure, they may have elections, but no one's running opposed to the candidates, and the Governor Cuomo, has a heavy hand in who's elected and supported as DNC members. It's a very closed party. Then there are 75 at-large members. There used to be no at-large members, then there were about 30, and then it moved up to 75. I used to be an at-large member, and it's supposed to meet diversity goals. Of course, it is diverse, but it doesn't mean that those people don't have financial interests in the party or in keeping the status quo. These are unofficially appointed members. The chairman puts forward a slate, and the DNC is, the executive committee is supposedly, supposed to discuss it and debate it and vote on it. But there aren't elections. It is a slate that is given, and you're voting on it. So it's an appointed set of positions. And then there are about 20 to 30 members that come from affiliate organizations like the Democratic Governors Association, two spots, a chair and a vice chair from each of those organizations. So in total, there are 440 DNC members, and I will go as far to say 250 of those members are appointed or pushed, meaning unofficially, they're leaned in, they're elected, but really it's like through a slate election. Now, on the Unity Reform Commission, which I was on, I was one of the 8 people that Bernie Sanders appointed to this 21-person commission that met in 2017 and into 2018. We were tasked with running around the country, learning about the Democratic Party, what had gone wrong in the primaries, what had been in 2016 the primaries, and what could be reformed, what good tactics, what good things the party used to do in years back, what things needed to be changed, like notably superdelegates. But the other aspect of it was we were tasked with figuring out how the DNC was structured and how to fix it. The DNC right now, and really hasn't been for the last, I'd say, 15 years, a party that supports state parties. What happens when you don't support state parties, when you don't fund state parties, even if those state parties are flawed and do have issues? When you don't fund them, you're not funding local elections. You're not supporting local elections, and that's how the Koch brothers were able to swoop in and take over state legislatures. So, there are affiliated organizations of the Democratic Party that are focused on state legislature, but at the end of the day, that's kind of the DNC's job, is to fund state parties, build a pipeline, organize people. It used to be that they would partner with labor and labor would organize. Just as a bookmark here, we have a little bit of a deficit on the progressive side when it comes to organizing. Meaning official organizing. There's not a lot of experienced staff, and you have all these progressives running for office right now, and of course we have the blacklist, and there are not a ton of folks who have lengthy experience. And part of that reason is because the Democratic Party sucked resources away from training people on the ground, working with unions as they've been weakened, in developing this pipeline of not just leadership, but infrastructure to support elections. And so that's something hopefully that will change, because we have this groundswell of a progressive movement and people who are getting experience running in races. But it's important to have that infrastructure. So we lost 1,200 seats during the Obama years, and the money that the DNC was raising during those years was going directly to presidential campaigns and, as I've said notably, to a handful of well-paid consultants. So of these 440 members, 250 or so are appointed or undemocratically elected, meaning half the DNC, a little under half the DNC, is democratically elected, and half is not. And so that's how we have this structure right now that lacks accountability. On the Unity Reform Commission, Dr. Zogby in particular, Jim Zogby, who I interviewed on the show, he worked very hard, and I was on his committee to make sure that there's accountability in the Democratic Party. If the Democratic Party, the DNC, violates the bylaws, meaning if the chair violates the bylaws, who holds the chair accountable? Well, we tried to set up a committee that was elected, not appointed, to hold the chair accountable, and that did not go through. It was postponed. And of course, now we are in the year of the election, and the Democratic Party has tremendous power in choosing who the nominee is, especially since it's in controlled environments of the convention or in DNC meetings. And the chair has appointed a group of people to sit on the credentials committee at the convention, to sit on the rules committee of the convention, and the platform committee. They are not elected individuals. They are not DNC members who have gone into their own resources, run across the state to campaign to be DNC members. They're not people who are involved in local parties. For the most part, not all of them, but for the most part, these are people who have financial interests in keeping the status quo of the Democratic Party. They have financial interests in certain candidates. They have financial interests in perpetuating elections the way that they are, banning climate debates, perpetuating the military-industrial complex. They have financial interests that are weighed in keeping the Democratic Party a party of big business. Many of these people are lobbyists. Many of these people are consultants for presidential candidates or interest groups. Some of these people are consultants for big business. And, I will be discussing this on the show, so stay tuned. If you are not subscribing to Patreon already, that will help us fund that, because it's going to be a lot of research. Some of this stuff has been covered, but we want to go deeper, because I believe that the way at this point that we can make a change is really by holding these people accountable. We can't have an emergency meeting. Even if Tom Perez was to step down, who would replace him? The fix, I'll say it, is in. And how do we fight back? I'll highlight one member who stood out to me, just as a little bit of a teaser. She's a vice chair of the appointed rules committee that is at the convention. There's a sitting rules committee on the DNC, so don't get confused with that. And then there's one at the convention. And that member is Alex Rooker. And she was a California vice chair. And now she's a vice chair of the rules committee. She's also currently a senior advisor to Michael Bloomberg. On that list, I don't see anybody as of right now that is an advisor to Joe Biden or Pete Buttigieg or Bernie Sanders, of course. I see somebody who is paid as a senior advisor to Michael Bloomberg, and that is a vice chair of the Rules Committee. So one of the things that we wanted to do on the Democratic National Committee through the Unity Reform Commission, and we got a tremendous amount of pushback, was to ban conflicts of interest. When you look at this membership and you see who's appointed, good 75% of these people have a conflict of interest within the Democratic Party. They're making money off of candidates. They're making money off of the DNC pushing for rules changes that help their candidates. They're making money off of industries that are pushing for those candidates because they know that that candidate is going to support their industry, deregulate, to privatize, to ignore existential crises like climate change. This is how the DNC functions. Not to mention that a lot of these people are double dealing. They're working for Republicans too. They work for firms that represent Republicans. Maybe they don't specifically. Maybe it's a bipartisan firm. But that is not what the Democratic Party, as we know, should be. The Democratic Party, the DNC, exists in a system in which private parties are determining the outcomes of primaries that influence our elections. That's not really something that happens in other functioning democracies. Other functioning democracies, there is a form of accountability. We don't really have that here as of right now. And it all sort of had to be handled under controlled circumstances. The controlled effect is appointed committees, appointed by the chair, are deciding what kinds of reforms to pass. So we went around the country and we fought over reforms. We were in the minority of this commission. And then the reforms were presented. We published a report. And the commission's findings, some were voted on, some were watered down, some just disappeared. And that was all done by the Rules Committee that was appointed by Tom Perez. This goes back to a bigger point, which is at the DNC meeting in 2017, Tom Perez, in my opinion, was not fairly elected. And that was through some tactics that I don't think were fair, because they didn't have an answer to them. And I heard many different answers from the DNC. So something was up. First off, they used proxies. I don't want to get into the details of proxies, but during the first, he didn't clear on the first ballot. And he was one vote south on the first ballot, so had to go to a second ballot. And the rules had said that between those two ballots, the votes from the first ballot were to be disclosed to the candidates. So the candidates, during the break, could go and lobby those members to see if they could move them to their side. And the DNC said, oh, there was a technical issue, and we couldn't get those votes, we didn't have enough people. I heard so many excuses. I went to the DNC's chair, I went to the communications director, I went to multiple people in the DNC, and I got like 20 different answers. I don't know how many answers, but I got several different answers as to what had happened and why Keith Ellison was not given the votes so he could lobby them. And turns out, on the second ballot, people showed up that weren't in the room on the first ballot, and votes had moved from one to the other, and Keith Ellison won, even though many would have said that, Tom Perez won, even though many would have said Keith Ellison was supposed to win. And then later, it was reported that in between the break, between the first ballot and the second ballot, Valerie Jarrett and Barack Obama himself were lobbying members. So they clearly had access to those ballot votes. But the candidates did not, or one candidate did not. So Tom Perez was put there. He's the former Secretary of Labor. He's a known bureaucrat. And he basically runs the DNC as if it's his mini bureaucracy. He has appointed, literally in the same positions, people to his office that have the same jobs at the Department of Labor. And as a result, they are doing what he wants them to do. So this is, it's extremely complicated. The process is hard to understand. And one of the goals that I plan on doing on this show is explaining to you how this process works. This is just a brief primer, but many ask, what can be done? What can possibly be done to push back at this point? And I think it really comes down to naming names, explaining what their interests and ties are to, and calling them out. These are people who are sensitive. Even the chair is sensitive. He doesn't like pushback. Professional elected officials, people who actually fight to get in their positions, they may not like pushback, they may be sensitive to it, but they're used to it. But DNC members that were appointed that did not get elected to those positions do not like the pushback. And I think, it's not fair that they are rewarded with CNN contracts and then they don't disclose who they are. They're rewarded with contracts to the DNC and to some of these candidates. They're rewarded with all these financial perks for their, as Joe Biden said, 15th homes. And at the end of the day, we have a party that is not representing working people. We have a country that's in extraordinary crisis. And it is very, very likely that there might be some maneuvering to support Michael Bloomberg over Bernie Sanders. Now, I just want to end on this one point because there was an article that was posted today about Michael Bloomberg, about superdelegates coming back on the first ballot. My take on this is it's a distraction and don't get caught up in it. And I say this because there was a small group of people that were against superdelegates being eliminated, and they really didn't get any progress when it came down to the DNC vote. In fact, the entire DNC unified and voted to eliminate superdelegates on the first ballot. Of that group, a smaller group of that is the group that's texting with each other, and they're all white men, and they're very powerful, and they're very annoyed. But they're not getting anywhere, and they might even be a foil to distract away from the real injustice, which is there might be some maneuvering to support Bloomberg in getting on stage. I don't think it's smart to have Bloomberg on stage. I don't care how much we point at him and say he's a bad billionaire. You want to have more time for Bernie Sanders. You're going to have less time with another person on stage. And this guy's getting enough airtime by buying his way onto the airwaves. He shouldn't be buying his way into the primary. Not to mention the fact that it's not fair to people of color who worked very hard. It's not fair to other candidates that had small dollar donations that didn't hit the thresholds. And it's not fair to the system that Tom Perez gets to change the rules as he goes. This is not a party that should come down to a chair. And so this is my final point. This is all coming back to the chair. All roads lead to the chair. The nominations, the appointments that he made were his appointments. The rules to the debate should have been voted on, weren't. They were set by Chairman Perez. Chairman Perez has no experience in party politics. Seriously. And he's running this party as if it's his kingdom. And the effects are most likely that if he messes with this election, not only will he not be able to move on to run for governor of Maryland as he might want to do, but our democracy is really on the threshold of falling apart, whatever remaining democracy we have. And I think that the blood will be on the hands of the Democratic Party if Donald Trump is reelected. So with that, subscribe to patreon.com/The Nomiki Show. This was a special recording of what's going on at the DNC, how's the DNC structured. I will be doing much more of this. Push back on Tom Perez. Call up if you know DNC members, if you know who your DNC members are or the chair of your party is in your state. That's probably a better path. Call them up, call the DNC's office, and maybe we'll have more actions in the coming weeks. But first step is understanding how it works. It's not a monolith. It is divided. Don't forget, Keith Ellison almost won the election, and he would have if it was with all democratically elected DNC members and not just appointees. So we have a controlled environment here, and we've got to fight hard, and Bernie has to win with big margins so that they don't get away with this. Thank you so much. Live from my house in Astoria, New York. Maybe I'll get a green screen at some point, but I'll be back in studio, and you'll see the live show this week on Monday, and feel free to send me your comments and subscribe to Patreon and YouTube. Thanks.